April 16, 1945, 8:27 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. The sea is strangely calm. Gray morning light stretches across the Pacific, turning the water into a sheet of dull steel. Far from the massive invasion fleet gathering around Okinawa, a handful of ships stand alone on the horizon. They form the outermost shield of the Allied Armada, the radar picket line. At the center of this lonely station rides a destroyer USS Laffey, DD-724. Her hull cuts quietly through low swells. Antennas rotate steadily above the bridge, sweeping the sky in slow circles. Every few seconds, a radar emits its invisible pulse, searching the empty horizon for movement. On the bridge, Commander Frederick Julian Beckton studies the sea through binoculars. The young destroyer captain looks calm, but the tension in his shoulders betrays the truth. Everyone out here knows what the radar line really is. Bait. The picket ships sit miles ahead of the fleet, deliberately exposed. Their job is simple and brutally dangerous. Detect incoming Japanese aircraft first. Warn the carriers and transports behind them. But that warning comes at a price. The enemy planes find the picket ships first. Below deck, sailors move through narrow steel corridors carrying coffee mugs and maintenance tools. The routine feels almost peaceful. Gunners check ammunition belts. Signalmen adjust radio frequencies. Engine room crews monitor, gauges glowing in the dim machinery space. It is the kind of quiet morning sailors learn not to trust. Because by the spring of 1945, the war in the Pacific has changed. Japan no longer fights to win. Japan fights to die. Across the ocean, pilots climb into aircraft loaded not just with bombs, but with fuel for a one-way flight. They tighten headbands marked with a rising sun and bow to their ground crews. Kamikaze. The word spreads through Allied fleets like a shadow. Suicide attackers who do not fear death cannot be deterred. They must be destroyed before they reach their target. And radar picket ships like Laffey are the first obstacle. 8:32 hours. Inside the Combat Information Center, a radar operator leans closer to the glowing green screen. A faint echo flickers. Then another. He adjusts the range dial. More signals appear. His voice cuts through the compartment. Multiple contacts. Bearing 320. The room freezes. Officers step closer to the radar display. Dots multiply across the screen like a swarm. The officer of the deck grabs a voice tube to the bridge. Bridge, CIC. Large formation approaching from the north. Commander Beckton lowers his binoculars. How many? There's a brief pause as the radar operator recalculates. Estimate 20, possibly more. Beckton exhales slowly. He has seen this before. The Japanese often send waves of aircraft toward Okinawa, hoping some will break through the fighter screen and strike the fleet. But the radar picket ships rarely face the full force. Usually the attackers scatter once intercepted by Allied fighters. Usually. But today something feels different. Beckton gives the order. Sound general quarters. Instantly the destroyer comes alive. Alarms echo through every compartment. General quarters. General quarters. All hands man your battle stations. Coffee cups are dropped. Boots thunder through passageways. Gunners race toward their turrets. Ammunition crews haul shells toward ready racks. Damage control parties grab fire hoses and medical kits. Within seconds, the destroyer transforms from a quiet patrol vessel into a floating fortress. Twin 5-inch/38 caliber guns rotate toward the northern sky. 40mm Bofors cannons swing into firing position. 20mm Oerlikon guns wait, like steel claws along the rails. Above them all, the radar antenna keeps spinning. 8:41 hours. The first friendly aircraft appear overhead. Blue-painted fighters from nearby carriers streak across the sky. F-6F Hellcat. They roar north to intercept the incoming formation. For a moment, hope flickers across the bridge. If the fighters stop them early, the picket station might escape another day of hell. But the radar screen tells a darker story. The incoming formation does not turn away. It splits. Some aircraft dive toward the fighters. Others continue straight toward the radar station, toward Laffey. Inside the CIC, The radar operator's voice rises again. Contacts now closing rapidly, altitude decreasing. Commander Becton watches the northern horizon through binoculars. At first, he sees nothing, just clouds. Then tiny black specks appear against the sky. They grow larger, faster, too fast. And suddenly the truth becomes clear. This is not a scattered raid. This is a coordinated attack. Dozens of Japanese aircraft racing directly toward a single destroyer. Toward them, the bridge goes silent for a moment. Then Becton speaks quietly. Steady the ship. The destroyer begins a slight turn, presenting her guns to the incoming threat. Below deck, gunners tighten their grips on firing handles. Sweat forms beneath steel helmets. Someone whispers a prayer, because now the approaching aircraft are close enough to see clearly. Some carry bombs. Others fly low and fast. And a few are already descending straight toward the ship. The first Kamikaze has chosen its target, and the sky above USS Laffey is about to explode. April 16, 1945, 8:43 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. The sky erupts. American carrier fighters slash through the incoming formation, their engines screaming as they dive into the swarm of Japanese aircraft. Machine guns chatter across the clouds. Tracers streak like burning wires across the morning light. A Japanese bomber suddenly bursts into flames. Another spirals downward, trailing black smoke before disappearing into the sea. But the swarm does not break. Several aircraft push through the interception, diving lower, slipping beneath the protective umbrella of the fighters. Their engines roar louder with every passing second. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard USS Laffey, DD-724, the radar operator shouts over the noise. Multiple attackers breaking through. Commander Frederick Julian Becton grips the rail of the bridge wing. His binoculars track the nearest aircraft as it dives through a patch of cloud. Now the enemy planes are unmistakable. Japanese Navy dive bombers. And mixed among them, something far more dangerous. Kamikaze. Becton lowers the binoculars. Open fire. The destroyer answers instantly. The forward twin turrets unleash their first volley. Twin 5-inch guns thunder together, the concussion rippling across the deck like a physical. Shells climb toward the sky, bursting into black flak clouds directly in the path of the attackers. A moment later, the lighter guns join the storm. 40mm Bofors cannons hammer the air with rapid, violent bursts. 20mm Oerlikons scream in continuous streams of tracer fire. Within seconds, the destroyer becomes a wall of steel and flame. The sky fills with exploding shells. The first attacker dives straight through it. The Japanese plane shakes violently as fragments tear through its wings, but the pilot never pulls away. Instead, he pushes the aircraft even faster toward the ship, toward the bridge. Gunners shout warnings across the deck. Plane coming in. The aircraft grows larger in the windshield glass. 100 yards. 50. At the last possible moment, Becton yells. Hard left rudder. The destroyer begins a violent turn. The Kamikaze slams into the water beside the ship instead of the bridge, exploding in a towering column of white spray and orange fire. The blast rocks the hull, but causes little damage. For a single heartbeat, relief spreads across the crew. Then the next attacker appears. This one comes in low, too low for the main guns to track. The pilot races along the waves, engine howling, wings nearly touching the water. He pulls up at the last second and drives directly toward the stern of the destroyer. 20mm gunners fire desperately. Tracer rounds tear through the cockpit, but the aircraft does not break. It strikes the aft deck with a thunderous crash. The explosion throws men across the gun platform. Burning aviation fuel splashes across the steel deck, igniting instantly. Smoke pours upward in thick black clouds. Damage control crews rush forward with fire hoses. But before they can even reach the flames, another shout erupts from the starboard side. More planes. The sky above the ship has become a nightmare. Enemy aircraft circle through flak bursts like wolves surrounding prey. Some dive from high altitude. Others skim the waves. The destroyer fires at all of them. Every gun, every barrel. The noise is deafening. Then the third attacker appears. This one dives directly toward the forward gun turret. Gunners swing their weapons upward and unleash everything they have. Tracer rounds slice through the aircraft's wings. Smoke pours from the engine, but the kamikaze pilot holds his course. At the last second, he releases his bomb. The weapon strikes the deck near the forward gun mount and detonates with a brutal blast. Steel plates bend upward. Shrapnel slices through cables and equipment. Several sailors collapse where they stand, and before the smoke clears, the crippled aircraft itself slams into the deck. Flames erupt across the bow. Commander Becton feels a shockwave shake the bridge beneath his feet. 3 minutes. The attack has lasted less than 3 minutes, and already the destroyer is burning. But the sky above them is still filled with enemy aircraft. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar operator stares at the screen in disbelief. New contacts are still approaching. More than before. Captain, additional formation inbound. Becton looks north again. Through the smoke and flak bursts, more aircraft appear on the horizon. Dozens. This was only the first wave, and the destroyer is already wounded. Fires rage on the deck. Casualties lie beside shattered gun mounts. Yet the crew continues loading shells and firing guns as fast as human hands can move, because every man on the ship understands the truth now. This attack is not ending. It is only beginning, and the next kamikaze is already diving toward them. April 16, 1945, 8:47 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. Smoke crawls across the deck of USS Laffey, DD-724. Burning aviation fuel spreads in jagged rivers along the steel plating near the stern. Damage control sailors drag hoses through the smoke, while corpsmen kneel beside wounded crewmen, working quickly under the roar of the guns. But there is no time to recover, because the sky is filling again. High above the destroyer, Allied carrier fighters twist through the clouds in violent dogfights. The blue-gray shapes of F-6F Hellcat fighters streak past in pursuit of Japanese attackers. Machine guns hammer. One Japanese aircraft erupts into flame and falls spinning toward the ocean. Another explodes in midair. Yet still the attackers keep coming. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar scope is crowded with echoes. The operator stares at the glowing screen, almost unable to believe what he is seeing. The formation is enormous. Wave after wave of aircraft pushing through the fighter screen. Outside, Commander Frederick Julian Becton steadies himself against the bridge rail as the destroyer pitches through the swell. Smoke stings his eyes. Through binoculars, he counts more silhouettes breaking through the clouds. Dive bombers, fighters, and more kamikaze. Becton lowers the glasses slowly. They're coming straight for us. The words travel through the bridge like cold air. But the crew of Laffey does not hesitate. The forward gun turrets swing again, tracking the closest attackers. Ammunition crews pass shells hand to hand, their movements automatic after months of war. Target bearing 020. Range closing. The first of the new attackers dives steeply from above the clouds. Gunners open fire instantly. The destroyer's 5-inch guns thunder again, sending explosive shells bursting across the dive path. Black clouds of flak bloom around the descending aircraft. Fragments tear into its wings. But the pilot keeps coming. Closer, closer. Then the aircraft suddenly shudders. A direct hit from a Bofors cannon rips through the fuselage. The plane bursts apart less than 100 yards above the ship, scattering flaming debris across the sea. For a moment, cheers erupt from the gun crews, but they die almost instantly, because 2 more aircraft appear behind it, both descending, both aimed directly at the destroyer. The gunners fire again. The sky becomes a storm of tracers. One aircraft veers sharply away under the barrage and crashes into the water in a plume of spray. The other keeps coming. Its engine screams louder as the pilot pushes the aircraft beyond safety limits. Smoke pours from the wings, yet it does not break. It strikes the destroyer's deck near the after gun mount. The explosion is devastating. Flames erupt across the stern. The blast throws sailors off their feet. Ammunition lockers burst open, scattering shells across the deck. For several seconds, the stern disappears behind fire and smoke. Fire control aft is down, someone shouts. But the attack does not pause. Another kamikaze dives out of the clouds. This one aims straight for bridge. Commander Becton sees it first. Hard right rudder. The destroyer swings violently. The aircraft barely misses the bridge structure, clipping the ship's radar antenna before smashing into the sea beside the hull. The explosion sends a wall of water crashing over the deck. Men struggle to stay on their feet. Inside the CIC, alarms begin to scream. Electrical circuits flicker. Radar screens briefly go dark. Then power stabilizes again. But the reports coming from the deck grow worse by the minute. Multiple fires aft. Gun crew casualties. Medical team needed on the main deck. Still the destroyer fights. Every remaining gun continues firing. Bofors cannons hammer at targets barely visible through the smoke. 20-millimeter guns chatter nonstop, and the forward 5-inch turrets continue launching shells toward the incoming aircraft. Above the chaos, American fighters dive again to help. Hellcats roar low over the destroyer, chasing Japanese aircraft across the sky. One fighter streaks past so close that sailors on deck can see the pilot's face inside the cockpit. He fires point-blank into a diving enemy plane. The Japanese aircraft explodes only seconds before it would have struck the destroyer. But the pilots cannot stop them all. Another group of attackers breaks through the fighter screen. For aircraft, flying low, too low for long-range interception. They spread out as they approach the ship, each one choosing a different angle of attack. Commander Becton watches them through binoculars. He understands immediately. This is deliberate. A coordinated strike meant to overwhelm the destroyer's guns. Even if one plane is shot down, another will get through. He lowers the glasses slowly. Hold your fire until they commit, he orders. Around him, gunners wait with fingers tight on the triggers. The aircraft grow larger, engines screaming. Sunlight flashes across their wings as they descend toward the ship, and then all 4 attackers dive at once. The sky above USS Laffey turns into pure fire. April 16, 1945, 8:51 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. For aircraft descend together. From the bridge of USS Laffey, DD-724, they appear like dark arrows falling through the sky. Sunlight flashes across their wings as they split apart, each pilot choosing a different direction of attack. It is a classic saturation strike. One target, multiple angles. Too many threats for a single ship to stop. Commander Frederick Julian Becton watches the pattern unfold through binoculars and immediately understands the danger. If the gunners fire too early, the attackers will simply adjust their dive paths. He lowers the glasses. Stand by. All across the destroyer, gun crews hold their breath. 40-millimeter Bofors crews track the descending shapes with trembling barrels. 20-millimeter gunners lean into their weapons, eyes locked on the sights. The aircraft continue falling. 3,000 feet. 2,000. Smoke from earlier fires drifts across the deck, blurring the sky. Becton waits 1 second longer. Then he shouts, "Open fire." The destroyer erupts. Twin 5-inch/38 caliber guns thunder from the forward turret, launching explosive shells directly into the descending formation. The air fills with violent black bursts of flak. Almost instantly, the lighter weapons join. Bofors cannons hammer the sky with rapid, brutal rhythm. Oerlikon guns spit streams of orange tracer fire that stretch upward like glowing ladders. The first attacker flies straight into the storm. Shell fragments rip through its wings. The engine explodes in a sudden fireball. The aircraft disintegrates before it reaches the ship, scattering burning wreckage across the water. But the other 3 keep coming. The second attacker dives from the port side. Gunners track him perfectly. A burst from the Bofors cannons tears across the fuselage, shredding the cockpit canopy. The aircraft begins to wobble. For a moment it looks as if the pilot will lose control. Instead, he corrects the dive and continues straight toward the destroyer. At the last second, the aircraft clips the ship's forward mast. Metal screams. The plane cartwheels across the deck before exploding beside the forward gun mount. Flames and wreckage scatter across the bow, knocking sailors to the deck. The third attacker comes in lower, too low for the main guns to track. 20-millimeter gunners open fire at point-blank range. Tracers rip through the aircraft's wings and fuselage, But the Kamikaze pilot holds his course. The aircraft slams directly into the aft superstructure. The explosion is enormous. A tower of flame rises above the destroyer's stern. Steel plating buckles under the impact. The blast throws men across the deck like rag dolls. For several seconds, the aft section disappears behind smoke. Inside the engine rooms, the entire ship shudders violently. Pipes rattle. Steam gauges spike. Yet somehow the machinery keeps running. On the bridge, Commander Becton steadies himself against the chart table. 3 aircraft destroyed. But the 4th attacker is still coming. This one approaches from high altitude. Straight down. The pilot dives through the smoke plume rising from the burning stern, using the chaos as cover. Gunners struggle to track the aircraft through the haze. Where is he? Lost visual. Suddenly the plane bursts through the smoke directly above the bridge. Too close. Becton sees the aircraft only seconds before impact. The rising sun flashes off the cockpit canopy. Inside sits a young Japanese pilot flying the final seconds of his life. Brace! The aircraft crashes across the deck just behind the bridge structure. The explosion slams into the command tower like a hammer. Windows shatter instantly. Radio equipment sparks violently as cables snap. Flaming debris scatters across the main deck. For a moment, the bridge fills with choking smoke. When the air clears slightly, Becton steps forward again. Below him, the destroyer is burning in multiple places. The aft superstructure is heavily damaged. Several gun crews lie motionless beside their weapons. And yet, the ship is still moving. The engines are still turning. And most importantly, the guns are still firing. Across the horizon, the sky reveals a terrifying truth. More Japanese aircraft are approaching. Not just a few, an entire formation. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar operator stares at the screen in disbelief. Captain, additional contacts. Becton turns toward the north once more. Through drifting smoke, he sees them emerging from the clouds. A dozen aircraft, maybe more, all heading directly for the wounded destroyer. The attack is not ending. It is escalating. And USS Laffey, already struck again and again, now faces the largest wave yet. April 16, 1945, 8:56 hours. Radar Picket Station 1 north of Okinawa. Smoke towers above the battered silhouette of USS Laffey, DD-724. From a distance, the destroyer looks doomed. Flames crawl along the aft deck. Sections of twisted metal hang from shattered gun mounts. Thick black smoke pours from multiple fires across the superstructure. And yet the ship is still moving. Her engines continue turning deep below the waterline. Her radar still spins slowly above the bridge. And her guns are still firing. On the forward deck, sailors stagger through drifting smoke carrying ammunition boxes toward the remaining operational weapons. Their uniforms are blackened with soot, helmets streaked with sweat and ash. But no one leaves their post, because the sky is filling again. Through the haze, more Japanese aircraft appear descending toward the radar picket station. The formation is scattered now, broken by earlier dogfights with American fighters. But the intention remains clear. Every pilot is hunting the same target, the crippled destroyer below. Commander Frederick Julian Becton stands on the damaged bridge wing, binoculars pressed tightly against his face. Around him, shattered glass crunches under his boots. Electrical wires hang from broken consoles inside the bridge compartment. He lowers the binoculars slowly. Here they come. The next attackers arrive in pairs. 2 aircraft break from the clouds and dive steeply toward the bow. The destroyer's forward 5-inch guns swing upward and fire almost instantly. The concussion slams across the deck like rolling thunder. Shell bursts erupt in the path of the first attacker. The aircraft explodes midair, fragments tumbling across the sky. But the second pilot pushes straight through the flak. 40-millimeter Bofors cannons hammer at the descending plane. Tracer rounds rip through the fuselage. Flames begin licking along the wings. Still the aircraft continues. Closer, closer. Then, only second from impact, the burning plane suddenly veers sideways. Instead of striking the ship directly, it crashes into the sea only yards away. The explosion throws a wall of water across the destroyer's deck. Men are knocked to their knees, but the ship survives again. For a brief moment, the sky clears. Then another aircraft appears. This one flies low along the waves, approaching from starboard. The pilot climbs slightly at the last second, aiming directly for the destroyer's midsection. 20-millimeter gunners open fire. The aircraft shakes violently under the impact of dozens of rounds. But the pilot never pulls away. The Kamikaze slams into the superstructure near the number 3 gun mount. The explosion sends fire roaring across the deck. Flaming wreckage skids across the steel plating before falling overboard. Damage control teams rush forward immediately. Sailors drag hoses through smoke, while others climb ladders carrying portable extinguishers. One gun crew continues firing even as flames burn only feet away from their position. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar screens flicker again as electrical circuits struggle under the strain. The operator wipes sweat from his face and studies the display. New echoes appear, more aircraft approaching. But something else appears too. Friendly fighters returning. High above the destroyer, several American aircraft dive toward the attackers again. The distinctive shape of the F-4U Corsair cuts across the sky, engine roaring. One Corsair chases a Japanese dive bomber straight toward the radar station. The American pilot fires a burst of machine gun fire that tears the bomber apart less than a mile from the destroyer. The wreckage splashes into the ocean, but still the attackers keep coming. By now, the crew of Laffey understands a pattern. Each surviving aircraft will attempt the same thing. A final dive, a deliberate crash. Another Japanese fighter suddenly drops out clouds directly above the ship. Too close. The forward Bofors cannons swing upward and fire. Tracers rip across the aircraft's wings. The pilot never wavers. He drives the plane straight down toward the destroyer's forward deck. At the last possible moment, the aircraft clips the ship's gun director tower. The impact rips the wing off. The crippled plane cartwheels across the deck before plunging into the sea. Another near miss. Another miracle. Commander Becton looks across the burning decks of his ship. By now the destroyer has been struck again and again. Fires rage across multiple compartments. Casualties continue to mount, yet the crew continues loading ammunition and firing guns as if the ship were still untouched. Because they know something the attackers do not. The destroyer is still fighting. And as long as USS Laffey continues firing, she is still alive. But the radar operator inside the CIC suddenly shouts a warning that chills every man on board. Captain, new formation approaching from the north. Becton raises the binoculars once more. Through the smoke, he sees them emerging from clouds. Not 2 aircraft, not 4, nearly a dozen, and they are descending directly toward the crippled destroyer. The largest attack yet is about to begin. April 16, 1945, 9:02 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. The destroyer burns from bow to stern. Flames flicker along twisted metal railings. Smoke pours from shattered compartments. The once clean silhouette of USS Laffey, DD-724, now looks like a warship dragged through an inferno, yet she is still moving. Her propellers churn steadily beneath the surface. Her radar antenna continues its slow rotation above the bridge, searching the sky even as smoke drifts across the spinning array, and her guns remain ready. But the men aboard Laffey know the truth now. They are reaching the limit. On the main deck, damage control teams struggle to contain fires that refuse to die. Hoses spray arcs of seawater across burning aviation fuel, while sailors drag the wounded away from shattered gun mounts. The air smells of smoke, oil, and hot steel. Then a shout erupts from the bridge. Aircraft approaching. Commander Frederick Julian Becton steps toward the bridge wing again. His uniform is smeared with soot, but his voice remains steady. Report. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar operator stares at the crowded screen. Multiple contacts, closing fast. The next wave appears through the smoke. Nearly a dozen Japanese aircraft break through the cloud layer and descend toward the radar picket station. They fly in loose formation, engines roaring as they drop toward the wounded destroyer. Some carry bombs. Others carry something more dangerous. Intent. High above the ship, American fighters dive once more to intercept. The distinctive gull-wing silhouette of the F-4U Corsair slices across the sky as pilots race to stop the attackers before they reach the ship. Machine guns blaze. One Japanese aircraft erupts in flame and falls away. Another spirals toward the ocean, trailing black smoke. But several attackers slip through the defense, and they are heading straight for Laffey. Open fire. The destroyer answers instantly. The forward 5-inch guns thunder again, their blasts rolling across the deck like artillery fire. Shells burst in the path of the incoming aircraft, filling the sky with violent flak explosions. Bofors cannons join the storm. 20-millimeter guns scream continuously. For several seconds, the air above the destroyer becomes a wall of fire. The first attacker dives straight into it. Flak bursts tear apart the aircraft before it reaches the ship. Burning fragments scatter across the sea. But the second attacker comes lower. Too low, 20-millimeter gunners fire desperately as the plane races toward the starboard side. Tracer rounds punch through the fuselage. The pilot never pulls away. The Kamikaze strikes the deck near the midship gun mount. The explosion shakes the destroyer violently. Flames burst upward in a roaring column of fire. Men are thrown across the deck. One of the Bofors guns falls silent. For a moment, the destroyer seems to stagger under the damage. But then the remaining guns resume firing. Another aircraft dives from above the clouds. This one releases a bomb just before impact. The weapon slams into the deck and detonates with brutal force. The blast rips open part of the superstructure and shatters nearby equipment. The aircraft itself crashes into the water beside the ship moments later. Shock waves ripple through the hull. Inside the engine rooms, machinery shakes violently but continues running. Reports flood the bridge. Forward gun crew casualties. Multiple fires midship. Electrical circuits failing. Commander Becton listens to each report with grim focus. Then he asks the one question that matters most. Are the engines still responding? A voice answers through the damaged control circuit. Yes, Captain. Becton nods once. As long as we can move, we fight. Above them, the sky grows darker again. Another attacker breaks through the clouds. This one dives steeply toward the forward turret. The gun crew tracks the aircraft perfectly. Bofors shells rip across the wings, shredding metal and fuel tanks. The plane bursts into flames. Yet the pilot holds his course. The burning aircraft slams into the deck just forward of the bridge. The explosion rocks the entire ship. For several seconds, the bridge disappears behind fire and smoke. When the air clears, Becton steps forward again. The damage is catastrophic. Parts of the superstructure are twisted beyond recognition. Fires burn across several compartments. Casualties continue to rise. And yet the destroyer is still alive, still moving, still firing. But even the bravest crew cannot fight forever. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar operator studies the screen again. Then his voice tightens. Captain, more contacts. Becton slowly raises the binoculars one more time. Through the drifting smoke, he sees them approaching from the north. Another formation, more aircraft, and the destroyer has almost nothing left to give. April 16th, 1945, 9:09 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. The ocean around the battered silhouette of USS Laffey, DD-724, is littered with debris. Burning wreckage floats among expanding oil slicks. Pieces of shattered aircraft drift across the waves, while columns of black smoke rise slowly into morning sky. From a distance, the destroyer looks finished. Sections of her superstructure are twisted and scorched. Parts of the deck are blackened by explosions. Several gun mounts stand silent beside fallen sailors. Yet one thing remains unmistakable. The ship is still fighting. On the forward deck, exhausted gun crews continue loading shells into remaining operational 5-inch/38 caliber guns. Their hands move with mechanical rhythm, despite blistered skin and smoke-filled lungs. Each shell slams into the breach. Each firing cycle sends another thunderous blast toward the sky. Nearby, Bofors crews struggle to keep their cannons operational. Ammunition clips pass from sailor to sailor, while mechanics quickly clear jammed feed systems. The guns must not stop, because above them, the enemy returns. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar signals bloom across the glowing screen once more. The operator leans closer. Try to count the incoming aircraft through the interference caused by damaged electronics. His voice rises. Multiple contacts approaching fast. Commander Frederick Julian Beckton hears the report through the damaged communications line. The captain wipes soot from his eyes and raises binoculars again. The horizon answers with dark shapes. More aircraft. Not many this time, but enough. The remaining Japanese pilots descend through broken cloud layers, each one seeking the same target that has already survived impossible punishment, the destroyer beneath them. High above the radar picket station, Allied fighters dive once more to intercept. The deep roar of engines announces the arrival of another flight of F-6F Hellcat fighters. One Hellcat streaks across the sky, chasing a Japanese bomber that is already diving toward Laffey. Machine guns flash. The bomber explodes in midair, but two attackers slip past the interception. Both descend toward the wounded destroyer. Target's bearing 035. A gunner shouts. The forward guns rotate again. Even damaged weapons must fire now. The first attacker dives steeply. Bofor's cannons track the aircraft as it falls through the smoke. Tracer rounds strike the wings, tearing away panels of metal. The plane begins to burn, yet it continues downward. At the last possible moment, the flaming aircraft veers slightly and crashes into the ocean only yards from the destroyer's hull. A towering column of water crashes over the deck. For several seconds, sailors struggle to stay on their feet, but the ship survives. The second attacker approaches differently. Low, fast, skimming the waves. 20mm gunners fire continuously as the aircraft races toward the destroyer's starboard side. Tracers punch through the fuselage. The pilot keeps coming. The Kamikaze climbs slightly in the final seconds, aiming for the already damaged superstructure. Then a miracle occurs. A Hellcat fighter dives from above at incredible speed. The American pilot fires a burst of machine gun fire that shreds the attacking aircraft only moments before it would have struck the ship. The Japanese plane disintegrates in a flash of flame. Debris rains harmlessly into the sea. For the first time in what feels like hours, the sky begins to clear. Commander Beckton scans the horizon carefully. No immediate attackers. The radar operator confirms the same report. Captain, no new contacts. A strange quiet settles over the destroyer. The guns fall silent one by one. Only the crackling of fires and the distant roar of aircraft engines break the silence. Around the ship, sailors begin to understand something almost unbelievable. They are still alive, despite bombs, despite kamikaze strikes, despite relentless waves of attackers. The destroyer has endured, but the battle has taken a terrible toll. Damage control teams continue fighting stubborn fires, while corpsmen move among the wounded on smoke-covered decks. Some gun mounts are destroyed. Sections of the superstructure are barely recognizable. Yet the engines still run, the radar still turns, and the ship still floats. Commander Beckton lowers his binoculars slowly. For the first time since the attack began, he allows himself to breathe. But even now he knows the truth. The war is not finished. The enemy could return at any moment. And if they do, the battered destroyer will have to fight again. Because of the men aboard USS Laffey, surrender was never an option. Only survival. Only endurance. Only the determination to hold the line until help finally arrives. April 16th, 1945. 9:30 hours. Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. Smoke coils lazily from the damaged aft deck, a black ribbon twisting against the pale morning sky. The steel hull of USS Laffey, DD 724, creaks under stress, but she still rides the swells with grim determination. Flames flicker across shattered railings, and pools of burning fuel reflect the sun like molten silver. Around her, the Pacific is a mirror of devastation, littered with twisted metal, floating wreckage, and drifting life jackets. On the bridge, Commander Frederick Julian Beckton scans the horizon through soot-streaked binoculars. His hands are blackened with smoke, eyes red from heat and exhaustion. Yet he does not falter. Around him, surviving officers coordinate firefighting and repair efforts, shouting orders over the roar of the dying inferno. Damage report. Beckton calls. Aft gun mounts destroyed, forward guns operational barely. comes a strained reply. Medical teams drag the wounded through smoke-filled passageways. Each step is a struggle. Every moment could be the last. The cries of injured sailors echo through corridors as corpsmen and volunteers administer first aid amid the chaos. On the deck, Seaman First Class Charles Sweeney checks his Oerlikon cannon once more. His gloves are scorched, hands blistered, yet the weapon is ready. Around him, men haul hoses, kick burning debris aside, and fight stubborn fires threatening to ignite spilled ammunition. Their faces are a mix of soot, sweat, and sheer determination. The ocean seems calm now, but the calm is deceptive. Every sailor knows the sky can erupt again at any moment. Radar operators scan continuously, eyes locked on the glowing green screens. Tiny blips could signal another wave of kamikazes, or the faintest hint of enemy reconnaissance planes. And yet, the destroyer continues to fire. Each operational gun hammers the air relentlessly. Tracer rounds streak into clouds, and flaming shrapnel from previous attacks still drifts across the deck like ghosts. Every shell fired is an act of defiance. Every explosion a statement. This ship will not die. Below deck, engineers fight to maintain propulsion. The boilers scream under strain, and every gauge trembles violently, but the machinery holds. Without power, Laffey would drift helplessly toward destruction. With power, she remains a thorn in the enemy's side, a moving fortress of steel and determination. From a mast, lookouts sweep the horizon again. The Pacific sun glints off distant planes, but these are Allied fighters, not the kamikaze pilots who have already punished the destroyer. Relief mixes with exhaustion as the immediacy of threat subsides. For the first time since dawn, the crew feels a fragile moment of safety. Still, Commander Becton remains vigilant. He knows the Battle of Okinawa is far from over. Radar picket duty is unforgiving. One day, another strike could come. But today, they have survived the unthinkable. 6 kamikazes, multiple bombs, dozens of near misses, and the ship still floats. The deck is a graveyard of twisted metal and fallen comrades. Yet the spirit aboard is unbroken. The men of Laffey gather where they can, some leaning against railings, some kneeling beside fire hoses, and others checking the remaining weapons. The smell of smoke and burning oil clings to everything. Voices are hushed but steady. They speak of survival, not fear. They speak of each other, not the enemy. On the bridge, Becton finally allows himself a faint nod. Not for victory. There is still work to do, but for endurance. The destroyer has become a legend, not because of a single heroic act, but because of collective resolve of every man aboard. History would later remember this day as the story of the ship that refused to sink. USS Laffey, battered, burning, and nearly destroyed, has stood alone against the fury of the Japanese sky. Every sailor, every gun crew, every engineer, and every medical team had played a part. Their determination had kept the Pacific Fleet safe, at least for one day. As the smoke begins to thin, the survivors look out the horizon. The sky is quiet now, but their eyes remain watchful. The ship moves steadily through the calm waters, scarred but alive. And the men know that in war, survival is often the greatest victory of all. In that moment, a battered destroyer and her crew had achieved the impossible. Against overwhelming odds, against relentless death from above, they had endured. They had survived. They had refused to die. April 16, 1945. Radar Picket Station 1. The USS Laffey, forever the ship that would not die.